Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're looking at new cards which were introduced within the anime, Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s from episode 51. Metageus, the Steel Striking Dragon, is a level 7 Dark Attribute Dragon type effect monster with 2500 attack and 1500 defense. The requirement: you can activate by sending one monster, must be a level 7 or higher dragon type, from the hand to the graveyard. And the effect: during this turn, this card cannot be destroyed by battle or by the effects of your opponent's trap cards. Also, during a battle phase in which this card attacks a monster, this card can attack a monster one more time. I love the design of this card. I know alongside things that Rook has used, he has a couple of other monsters. He has his Rush Dragon Dragears, and he has another version as well. All three of them are level 7, all three of them are dragon type, and I think they share all the same attack and defense points of 2500 and 1500 respectively. So I think that's actually quite useful. The condition on it isn't too difficult to meet. You're likely to be able to have multiple level 7 or higher dragon types in the hand, so you can actually discard fairly easily. This provides it with a protection from trap cards and destruction from battle during that turn. So even if your opponent has anything they can use that can necessarily stop this card, it's going to be difficult to actually remove it from the field. Most likely you'll be able to negate its attack for the turn and that's it. And the nice thing is it can attack twice within the turn. Yes, it is limited to attacking only monsters, but at least it can clear your opponent's monsters, which makes it very decent. Chance is a normal trap card with the requirement: you can activate when an opponent's monster that's a level 7 or higher declares an attack. The effect is to draw 3 cards and reveal them to your opponent. If there's 2 or more monsters that are level 7 among them, you also gain 1500 life points times the number of those monsters that are level 7. I love the design of this card, and actually it has a good and a bad effect to it. Well, actually, I don't see any downsides to it. It's just a decent card to use. It does require your opponent to attack with a high level monster, so you are relying on what your opponent does, and that's always a bit of a concern. The effect is you just draw 3 cards. Even that effect alone is actually better than things such as Graceful Charity. It is limited to your opponent having to do things, but that's fine. And potentially you could get up to 4500 life points if you can actually stack your deck in a way where you can guarantee drawing 3 level 7 monsters. My own concern is it is a bit of a risk because it does force you to try and put in your deck enough level 7s where this can guarantee the effect. But in terms of life point recovery cards, this is definitely up there as being the strongest for the time being. Level Blast is a normal spell card with the requirement: you can activate if there's a face-up monster that must be a level 7 or higher on each side of the field. The effect is to choose one face-up monster you control and inflict 100 damage to your opponent times the chosen monster's level. During this turn, you cannot attack with more than one monster. I don't actually understand where you'd actually want to use this effect, unless it happens to be that your monster is a bit weaker, and it might be a point that you just want to do some damage within the turn, or your opponent might be on low enough life points that this actually might make the difference between you winning and losing, in which case that's fine. It does require both of you and your opponent to have a level 7 or higher monster, which in its best is quite conditional, but you're doing a minimum of 700 points burn damage to your opponent, which isn't bad for an effect, even if it does limit your monsters to just one attack for the turn. Depending on what you draw and how you've played your deck and how the current scenario is going with your field, it can make some difference. Surprise Barcode is a normal trap card with the requirement: you can activate when you take battle damage from your opponent's monster's attack. The effect is to excavate the top 7 cards from the top of your deck if there are 5 or more monsters among the excavated cards. After this card is activated, for the rest of the turn you do not take battle damage. Place the excavated cards on the top of your deck in any order. So this is very much their version of Wabuku or Hallowed Life Barrier, whichever you want to prefer. It prevents you from taking any battle damage for the rest of the turn, but it's very conditional. First, it has to be activated when your opponent's monster attacks. So instantly it's worse than Wabuku. Wabuku can be used whenever you want within your turn. So there's that. The other thing is Wabuku actually stops your monsters from being destroyed in battle. This doesn't. My other problem with this is it relies on you drawing into 5 or more cards that happen to be monsters. If you happen to draw into less than that, then you do still get the ability to excavate the cards and to put them in any order you want. So you do have that benefit. to essentially draw into what you want within the next few turns. My concern is that if you're relying on the battle protection effect from damage, you're not going to be able to get this off very successfully. I know they've got a massive thing to do with excavating cards, and I know that came about through the Sylvan archetype within the original Yu-Gi-Oh series, and even within things like Shooting Star Dragon's effect, where you flip over the top 5 cards if they happen to be tuners. You get to attack 1 time per tuner monster you've excavated. But for the time being, you don't have anything that's consistent to run alongside this within Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duels. So until that happens, this card is always going to remain very forgettable. Elemental Rush is a normal trap card with the requirement if you have 1000 or less life points, you can activate when your monster is destroyed in a battle with the opponent's monster. The effect is to send all monsters you control to the graveyard, then choose 3 monsters that must be level 7 earth, water, wind or fire attributes in your graveyard, and special summon them to your side of the field in attack position. This is a very high risk card. First, you do have to have 1000 or less life points to meet the condition. Your monster has to be destroyed in battle. That assumes that it's been protected from taking any further battle damage, so it either has to be in defense mode, or you need to have something that can actually stop you from taking battle damage during that turn to trigger the effect to begin with. The next point of call is you have to send everything that you control to the graveyard to randomly choose 3 monsters that happen to be level 7. So that's a very specific level to choose. It would have been nice if it actually been any level within any of those attributes, that way it can actually be beneficial. And my concern as well is you do have to stack your graveyard with these attributes. If you don't have the monsters in the graveyard to work alongside this strategy, then this effect doesn't work, because it says to choose 3 monsters. It doesn't say choose up to 3 monsters. That would have also been a lot more beneficial. Yes, they do go into attack position, and if you've got the relevant setup, it can be very useful. But there are so many conditions tied to this card, I don't think it's going to be that useful for that much longer. It's great if you're trying to run an elemental type of deck, so earth, fire, water and wind, you know, a bit like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but unless you're planning to do that, it's not worth the cost. It does remind me of another card called Elemental Burst, which was a card introduced within Yu-Gi-Oh! The original series. I mean, you will see it in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. It was used in the graduation match against Zane Truesdale by Jay Nuki. He sacrificed all of his elemental heroes, and he was then able to destroy all of Zane's cards. There's also another card, I think it's called Furin Kazan, and that has abilities as well based on the attributes of the monsters you already have on the field. And the final card is Seven's Road Force. This is a normal trap card with the requirement when your opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can activate if there are 10 or more monsters, must be level 7 in your graveyard. The effect is to choose 1 Seven's Road Magician in your graveyard and special summon it to your side of the field in attack position, then return all monsters your opponent controls to the hand. Now, you think I was complaining about the previous effect? I think this one is definitely a lot more difficult to pull off. It requires your opponent to declare a direct attack, which itself is risky. If they happen to get rid of this card before they attack, then you've got no defense. Secondly, it requires you to have 10 or more monsters, and they have to be level 7 specifically in your graveyard. So you're going to have to run almost half of your monster lineup, or maybe even more than half your monster lineup, with just level 7 monsters. Unless they can special summon themselves, or happen to be able to normal summon themselves, you're not likely to be able to pull this off. This effect is so specific, and it just revives your Seven Roads Magician. That's fine, and it does get the boosting effect as part of its condition, but it's just not worth the condition on it. I know it can compulsory evacuation devices all of your opponent's monsters, but it's so specific an effect, I don't see it's worth for the time being. Maybe in the future, when we have monsters that are level 7 that can normal summon themselves, maybe with half their attack and defense, such as Fusilier Dragon, the dual mode beast, or I think there's an insect version of that as well. Until we get those types of cards, this is definitely forgettable. What do you guys think of the number of cards that were introduced? Is there anything you think that's very popular that you can consider running? Or do you think all of these at the moment are just too conditional and you're waiting and holding out for more support? Whatever you think, leave those comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content.